Vajradara Sumatimo Nishasane Karma Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om A Guru Vajradara Sumatimo Nishasane Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om A Guru Vajradara Sumatimo Nishasane Karma Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradara Sumati Muni Shasan Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradara Sumati Muni Shasan Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Dhagi Jetsun Lama Tuje Che Nyamda Dala Tuje Siksu Su Gebe Shesan Dala Tendu Su Uyon Sunge Nawa Tsedu Su Tseche Nyingne Solwa Debe Dechen Korlo Visu Lekshune Yila Sambe Dede Malep Gemel Hunge Drubra Jinge Lo Tsoni Sodan Dikdun Shabe Tse Dunge Namge Yinsu Lekshun Lapchen Tsoni Yonsu Tsopadan Chera Nyedun Chamara Jinge Lo Chanchu Pargin Insen Tukuntu Niu Peme Siudru Lekshune Chanchu Drube Gegen Kunshishi Tungen de la Drubra Jinge Lo Dagi Lona Chola Chokpadan Chemin Samjur Ngemba Shiwad Chedan Timbe Dede Malupa Beme Lungi Drubra Jingil Dagi Lona Chola Chokpadan Chemin Samjur Ngemba Shiwadan Chedan Timbe Dede Mal Beme Lungi Drubra Jingilo Dorna Tingne Tsira Tamchedan Techi Pardune Kavatam Rese Kyamne Lama Kileme Tukje Chingi Dala Sixus Gongyab Drewe Nyamda Dachala Jetsun Lame Tuje Rabgong Kudan Sungi Nawa Dralme Tu Nyamsunyongwe Kesan Tobrasho Kewa Kundu Yanda Lama Dan Rame Cheki Pela Longche Sadan Lamgi Yunte Rabzon Dorje Changi Kopa Nyur Tobe Sho Pakyuke Kudan Dagi Olu Pakyuke Sundan Dagi Pakyuke Tugdan Dagi Tenyerme Chiktu Chingi Olu Makyuke Kudan Dagi Olu Makyuke Sundan Dagi Makyuke Tugdan Dagi Tenyerme Chiktu Chingi Mahamuni Shakyamunye Swaha Om Muni Mahamuni Shakyamunye Swaha Om Muni Mahamuni Shakyamunye Swaha. Sashi Pöke Chukshi Meto Trama Rirab Lingshi Nide Gembadi Sange Shinto Mikte Ulwarki Druku namda shingla chuparashu. Ye dam guru ratna mandrala kam niryata yami. Sangye chudan tsoge chonam la chancho pardo dani kyapsu chi dagi jinso gibe sonam ki drola pinchira sangye druparashu. Sangye chudan tsoge chonam la chancho pardo dani kyapsu chi dagi jinso gibe sonam ki drola pinchira sangye druparashu. Sangye chodan tsoge chonam la chancho pardo dani kyapsu dagi jinso gibe sonam ki drola pinchira sangye druparashu.
In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. With the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Good morning. Years ago, when I was studying in a more deeper way, when I was studying the Buddhist philosophy, we call it a philosophy because within the Buddhist tradition, there are mainly three aspects. There's a part where we study mostly the worldview. There's a part where we study the rules of conduct. And then there's a part where we study the meditation techniques. The first part, we call it Senyi in Tibetan. It's a part that we call philosophy, debate. And then the second part is Duwa or Vinaya. And then there's the Vajrayana part and the other meditation techniques anyway. During this period where I was studying this philosophical part, the studies begin. The first subject that we study has to do with debate. It means like learning how to reason and then learn how to discuss how to follow a logical process. And then we also create the basis of important with the basis of important concepts that for the worldview. So this is has the subject is the same for everyone, but then according to one's own abilities, it lasts 1 to 5 years. And then the second part is Dua, which is about conduct. And then there's where we study the mind, the different types of cognition. It's like the base is like how our mind works. And the part of logic within debate. once you have that foundation, before looking at the fundamental values of the philosophy, we we start with what is called drupta in Tibetan or siddhanta in Sanskrit. It's where we study the various world views of the different spiritual traditions. So before seeing the Buddhist worldview, we other worldviews are studied, mostly those that existed in India at the time. So when we study at the monastery today, the worldview of other traditions, there, there's there aren't other traditions that are very present, like Christianity, etc., because these are antique studies, And in 1,500 years ago, there wasn't Christianity present in India. So we study other worldviews to be able to then understand what Buddha transmitted. And there's a fundamental point that I wanted to start with today. What touched me more than any other thing when I was studying this drupta is that, wanting or not, or whether you are aware of it or not, we all have a worldview, our own worldview. We already have our own our own basis, our worldview. And the definition that's given is Rangi Lon, and then speaking Tibetan, it means Rangi Lon Teptar to Siddhanta, or translated into worldview, is English, the tenets is translated. But the simplest word is worldview or paradigm. So the definition is when we have a total certainty, an inner certainty of how the world is and how the things are. And this comes from a deep certainty. This touched me because often we start from the idea that we're thinking, oh no, I'm atheist, or I don't follow a religion, or maybe I was raised within a Christian context, but I don't actually follow any religion. But in reality, none of us, not just us here, but just generally speaking, none of us can live reality independently from his own paradigm. And in our own reality, we live our reality through three main aspects, which are our so-called worldview or paradigm, where in our worldview we make up, what reality is, what things are made up of, and within our worldview, we also project, what is happiness, what are the causes of happiness, and what is suffering, what are the causes of suffering, and within this worldview, we also project, what I do in life to be happy and to not suffer. We have a whole idealized image that is also part of our worldview about, who I'm supposed to be, who I want to be. And within that worldview, there's what's right, what's wrong. Once we have developed our own worldview, together with this, as a consequence, inevitably, we have our own rules of conduct. And as our rules of conduct, there are commitments or rules that we set up, like how I should act and how should I interact with the world to be in harmony and to correspond correctly with our worldview. Um, we need these rules of conduct because very often what happens is there's an incoherence between what we feel and what we think. I know that I shouldn't eat this, but I want to. I know that I shouldn't lie, but I want to. I know I shouldn't do that, but it happens that I want to. I know it would be better if I did this, but I just don't feel like it. So in our worldview, we create our system of belief where we say this is good, this is beneficial, this is harmful, this should be followed, this should be avoided, etc. But this doesn't come spontaneously and naturally. And as a consequence, to be able to follow well this view of ours, what we do is that we take commitments. We try to direct ourselves. And this is what we would call our rules of conduct. And this third part, the third part has to do with actions that we do. How can I say, the choices, the physical actions, the things that we do to manage to be in harmony with our worldview, to be happy, to avoid suffering. Now, let's remember that in our worldview, I mean, we project, what is happiness, what is suffering. So we establish in our view, we establish what we should do to be happy and what we should do to avoid suffering. And in this third part is where we act to. In this third part, where we familiarize ourselves, we try to act and do things to be happy and to avoid suffering. In our worldview, I mean, a very common view, one believes that when one is suffering, let's remember though, that's just in parentheses here, the worldview exists on a conceptual level and exists also on a non-conceptual, but it's mostly non-conceptual. And this paradigm in which we live, it's not something that we have. It's not that we don't follow this awareness that, okay, I know that to be happy I need to do this and not do that. If I were to ask any one of you, or if I asked everyone, if we were to write down what our paradigm is, it's difficult. So to understand our paradigm, we need to start from that third point. So where do I put my energy in my life? Where do I project my happiness? Where do I project the causes of suffering? What do I do to be happy? What do I do to avoid suffering? Where do I project my desire and my aversion? So, according to where I put my energy, I'm going to understand where I'm projecting my happiness, where I'm projecting what I think is the cause of my suffering. It's from our actions. We can then understand our worldview a little bit better. But there's a fundamental bridge. None of us is able to perceive anything, to interact with any situation or person independently of ourselves, independently of our own past. Each one of us has been raised in a similar context, but different. Jhana Wawani in Tibetan, it means what is similar is different by definition. So if it's similar by definition, it's different. This is the Tibetan saying. So even if we are Westerners and we've been raised in similar context, we've received similar information or similar, but similar means different. So each one of us has different experiences, has a different path, and our worldview in this present moment is made up of the information that we've received, and this information is conceptual and also non-conceptual. For example, the moment in which we're able to absorb more information, you know, um, it is, is in the first six months of life, and then and where we can absorb the most information is the first 6 months of life, and then the first 3 years of life up to the first 6 years, six of life. After 6 years, we're absorbing a lot less information, you know. So if you a newborn is absorbing much more than any university student. So, we're learning from not what we're being told, but what we're living in the context in which we find ourselves. We're learning from emotional states, from situations, what we're living around us, and we're absorbing this worldview and this way to act, to a way of reacting based on the world around us. And there's an enormous difference between a child raised in a certain context and compared to another that's very different, because we just absorb so much. Afterwards, then we start to have then we start to shape our paradigm on a more conceptual level, where we start to construct concepts. That's what our parents teach us, what media transmits to us. It's a, it's, it's a, it's called, it's the constructed part of our mind. And we can divide our mind into two parts. Lenke in Tibetan, the spontaneous aspects of our mind, like our emotions, for example. They are aspects that are not conditioned from culture or education. And then there are aspects of our mind that are absolutely constructed, kundak in Tibetan. I translate it as constructed aspects. These are things that are taught to us, even if we're not aware of it. For example, the stories that we hear when we're children, whether it comes from a book or the cartoons, the stories, these fables, they have a fundamental role. They lived happily ever after. It seems silly to say, but it is an amazing weight. As children, we grow up with this myth. In Brazil, when a baby girl, and for the baby girls, not all, but I heard it many times, if a girl, small one, if she hurts herself and cries to the mom or dad, "Oh, I hurt myself," the answer that is often given is, una volta, is, once you get married, it'll pass. It seems one says it without even thinking about what they're saying. But what's the message? The happily ever after, Walt Disney. When once you get married, everything will be fine. So little by little, one develops an idealized image of marriage. You know, you know. So, and I have nothing against marriage. I don't say it is neither the cause of happiness nor the cause of suffering. I'm just trying to pick out one aspect of a constructed view that gets developed. So as children, you know, we're learning so much from the world around us, the things we are learning, living, what is being told to us. We're just absorbed so much. And today we learn so much, not only through the social context, but also through any kind of media that one is in contact with. Little by little, we grow up, we go to school or university, we start learning, or we start reading, um, you know, and even the books that we read influence our worldview. Everything that we do, everything that we do and have done have influenced our reality today. The books that we read, the places we went, the first places we went to, the people that we have met. And there's another aspect that influenced our worldview, our our direct experiences. For example, if I do something and in that interaction I suffered, that that wound often remains, that conditions me in the future. So then when I find myself in a future moment where I have to react in a certain way, I mean, are we influenced or not by our past experiences? Of course we are. We're strongly influenced by every experience that we have lived in our past. So when we find ourselves in the present moment, and I have my own view of reality, my own paradigm, what makes up this view? What baggage have I brought? Just an infinite amount. But it's really important for us to start from the understanding, the certainty that each one of us perceives and lives every moment through this baggage that we've brought on a conceptual cognitive level, on a non-cognitive level, non-conceptual level. We live through our experiences, our traumas, our education, through our own body, inevitably. For example, our senses are similar, but they determine also our way of experiencing our reality. If you take another form of life, I guess an animal that has different senses, I mean, they perceive reality inevitably in a different way. Even among us, I mean, do we all have the same ability or the same hearing? Once someone explained to me that there are some stores, the like luxury stores, that don't want adolescents, that are just too busy and chaotic, and so they don't want young people. So they've introduced in some of these luxury boutiques a machine that generates a it generates a frequency that adults can't perceive, but that is disturbing to to young people, to adolescents. Because even as we develop our body physically, there are transformations that occur. Just look at a baby, an adolescent, an adult, and an elder person. They all have different hearing. I remember once, for many years in Nepal, there was a clinic where we would do an exchange. We would bring doctors to the clinic, and often they weren't Buddhist. And what would happen is, with very, very poor people, I was talking to a girl, and 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 what she would do, you know, she would she would say So she would like people would come and say that they didn't see very well, and they just were maybe nearsighted or something, and then she would just put on lenses, and they'd be able to see perfectly. And these people, um, not familiar with Western medicine, they would just start like make prostrations to her. You know. There was another example of a friend. She was deaf. Mhm. Um, um, she was deaf, and then she put on a hearing aid, and she was able then to hear, and she was really disturbed by it because she had never heard anything before, um, and imagine she wasn't even able to discern among the sounds. Could the sound of a car from far away? She couldn't understand what it was and where it was. So it was very, very difficult. What I mean to say is that we're heavily influenced by our senses, and our body is in constant transformation. It's not static. So, for example, we have hormonal cycles as well, not only monthly, or we have even longer hormonal cycles, and it's normal that as the years go by that our body transforms, and this influences us tremendously, short term and long term. We perceive reality through the whole of all of these things, and as a consequence, um, our perception of reality, so our paradigm, we then create rules like this is right, this is wrong, I should do this and I shouldn't do that. If in the past drank I drank water from a yellow glass and I got sick, at a certain point I create a kind of rule, or I say I don't drink water from yellow glasses. And every time I see a yellow glass, I stay far from it. So we create our own rules on what should be done and what shouldn't be done based on our own experiences, based on our own worldview, our own tenets, our own paradigm. Is that clear up to this point? Yes. So, and then what do? We try to the best of our ability to to do things that will bring us well-being and happiness, and avoid doing the things that are harmful and make us suffer. This is what we do in life, mostly. In just a few words, what we try to do in life, we try to do what we think is going to make us happy and give us well-being, and we try to avoid what makes us suffer. We try to obtain our objects of desire. We avoid objects of aversion, and we try to keep our objects of attachment. We try to hold on to the things that we think make us feel good and bring us well-being. And Buddhism isn't different. It's really important that when we talk about Buddhism or any spiritual path, it's not something that exists on a parallel reality, or that's different from our lives. In this case, it was Buddha Shakyamuni, a person who had his vision based on his experience, and then created his, rules of conduct. What will bring happiness? What brings suffering? So his worldview and his worldview, his rules of conduct, and his rules of action and familiarization, well, let's say they work better than ours, and then he shared them. And is this is something absolutely wonderful. This ability we have as humans to transfer information and experience from one to another. Take even language, take maybe cooking or carpentry. How many sense how many centuries of experience are behind a good pasta sauce, or pasta with tomato sauce. That even just making the pasta and how the grains should be ground. In Italy, pasta should be al dente. I imagine that when you at home, when you cook pasta, I mean, how, of course, it depends on the kind of pasta, but it could be, is it 5, 8 minutes, or do you cook your pasta for 45 minutes? Once we were in, a city called Shangri-La. It's this the border between the old border between Tibet and China. Is in the province of Yunnan, and we were at a restaurant, and there was pasta with tomato sauce, and it just, when it arrived, it was just inedible. And at a certain point, Tiziana, who was in the group, she she was used to always going to the kitchens of the restaurants, and she saw that they even had Italian pasta. She says, "If you had this Italian pasta, how did you make such bad pasta?" And then they showed her that they cooked the pasta for like 45 minutes, and so it's just a change of culture for them. They come from an experience where, for maybe their type of pasta, I mean, they have pasta in China, so their pasta needs to be cooked that long. So what I mean to say is not that one is right and the other one's wrong. I mean, it depends on what one's used to and what one finds tasty or not. But you know, but well, what I mean to say here too is even just a simple pasta with a tomato sauce, there's so much accumulated experience. Maybe one has learned from one's own mother or aunt or grandmother who also learned from someone else. So even just a simple plate of pasta with tomato sauce, so there's a transmission of knowledge and experience that's handed down from generation to generation. This is clear, isn't it? So anything we do, we're not, we, we, we didn't teach ourselves. Maybe someone says, I watch YouTube tutorials. I learn everything myself. No, that's not learning by yourself. It means learning by yourself means without coming into contact with anyone else's experience or learning. No, just yourself. But our way of learning, is through trial and error. So, okay. So I did this and it worked, so I repeated. I did this, it didn't work, I tried differently. If we had to start from scratch every time, we would be there, with stones trying to make fire. Instead, we have this ability to transmit from one to another our experience and our knowledge, and as it gets passed down from generation to generation, this all accumulates. And this is wonderful. We find it in science, and we find it in every area of our lives. So anything we do, even our way of dressing, our way of eating, and our worldview, it's not something that we generated, but it's something that we have received from others, and we transform it with our own experience. So given that we have this marvelous ability to learn from other people's experience, what Buddhism is this the experience that Buddha had, Buddha Shakyamuni, and through his own life, his path, or even that maybe even many lives, but we talk about the one that historically is most well known. He had his path, and he got to a world view and of a view of conduct and of action that brought to ultimate state of peace and satisfaction and harmony and well-being. And when Buddha reached this state, it was not an inner state that was that depended on other conditions. No, he reached a deep state of balance, because Buddha's worldview comes from the fact that he was a prince, and his father, when he was when he was just born, different wise men came to pay homage to him, and um, one said that one said that Siddhartha Shunu Tudrup in Tibetan, that he said that he was a very special child and had great potential, and he predicted that he would either be a a, a great emperor, a universal monarch, is a Sanskrit term, or would have been someone who, or a great spiritual guide that would transform the world. Remember that Prince Siddhartha was a prince that was part of the warring castes. That they were warriors, and of course the father wanted him to follow in his footsteps and uh, avoid suffering. He didn't want his son to suffer. So he wanted him to be a great emperor. And his father didn't want him to suffer at all, and he wanted him to be full of pleasures. He for his the any desire was totally satisfied. He gifted him a harem. Um, his father, um, his father thought that if his son saw the suffering of the world, he would look for um, an answer to that. So he really tried to protect him from all suffering. Um, but one of his greatest friends was the the one who led the chariot, the horses. So Prince Siddhartha had a very close relationship with him, and he every once in a while would take him outside the palace, and it's said that Buddha's Buddha's father didn't allow for there to be um, dead flowers. He didn't want him to be in contact with any aspects of aging or death and or sickness. Even if there was someone who was sick around the palace area, that he would have that person removed. And once, when Buddha was taken outside the palace with this friend of his, he had 4 encounters that changed his perspective. He met a sick person, with a very old person, with a dying person, and with a spiritual practitioner. These are the 4 important encounters that really transformed his his worldview. And he came back to the palace and he said to his father, "Are you at some point going to get sick?" And his father said yes. And he said, "Well, what about me?" He said, "Yes." "And what about dying?" His father said, "Yes." What about me? And then it said, so why are we doing all of this? Why are we doing all of this if we can't even avoid the suffering, if suffering is always present? And what is fundamental of Buddha's worldview, and it's not normally explained like this. Maybe some might think it's a little strange, but one of the one of the strange characteristics of Buddha is that Buddha thought never just gave up and said, okay, well, suffering is part of life, so let's just try to do our best and let's try to live well, so that, and even after death, things continue to go well for us. And this, many spiritual traditions are like this. Instead, no, Buddha said, I want to find the way to not have to suffer. That's it. To transcend, transcend the suffering, transcend sickness and death, the suffering of sickness and death. Find the way to be well, for others to be well, independently of where I am, a state of harmony, peace, and happiness that is continuous. And from this, the Buddha's path began. And at a certain point, he left completely. He completely left the palace. He escaped. He had a child named Rahula. He was also among one of his first disciples, and his wife, who was very much in love with him. It's said that they had a wonderful relationship, but she also left. Nothing wrong with family relationship, but just weren't the conditions that favored her spiritual development anymore. So it's really beautiful that actually his wife became the first nun, and his wife and son also became part of the spiritual community. And so what he did is, through his experience, he reached this state of balance and peace. And this shows us, one of the fundamental aspects of the Buddhist worldview, which is to not give up, to not to not give up your research for and not accepting that you have to suffer. Along his path, he tried many things, including ascetic practices, where one finds states of concentration and has a great control over the body and mind, and states where you're not in contact, let's say, with your body, but you have developed deep sense of pleasure and well-being. One transcends all pain. They're known today in India like sadhus. Like, for example, they do very strange things, like maybe I make a fist and I'll never open it again. So, or maybe for 35 years one hasn't opened his fist. Or I've seen cases where people just walk around like this. Maybe someone decides that they'll never lower their arm, and for 40 years, it keeps the arm up. I mean, imagine just the determination that one has to do this. I'm giving you two examples, or a little folklore, these two examples. But Buddha, he reached inner states of great bliss. It could stay in a very long time in these meditative states, but then they would end. And then when that state would end, then he'd go back to a normal state. And he said, I can't enter this meditative state for forever. I mean, maybe for years, for long periods, to reach this inner state of wellness. But then when it ends, I go back. So it's not a real solution. And so then he continued his path until he was able to reach the state called the so-called enlightenment. It's, in other words, it's an inner state of satisfaction and balance and peace. It's is called also nirvana, a state where one has been able to go beyond one's anger and jealousy and ignorance and fear and arrogance, reaching a state of harmony through a state of through the development of inner qualities like generosity and love and satisfaction and wisdom. So I'm trying to simplify a little bit. And what Buddha did in the end was to share with those who wanted. I mean, he never wanted or expected the world to follow his view. It's very interesting because there's not even one text. There's not a single text of Buddhist literature that doesn't begin with a question. There's always the request. Buddha never went to someone and said, I have found the truth and you need to all follow. He never did something like that. What he would do is, and people would see that he was well, and they would ask him what he did to reach like that. But this world view and the rules of conduct and practice, these have been transmitted from generation to generation, handed down generation to generation to us. So when really his ability, there's a great characteristic of Buddha, was adapting to 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 anyone according to their own characteristics, their own abilities. And so he would adapt the teachings to others' realities. So every place where he went, he taught in a slightly different way because he would find himself in different contexts. If he was teaching to a king and his ministers, he would teach in one way. And when he was in a totally different context, he would teach, totally differently. If you take the different teachings that Buddha gave, if you put them together, often they seem contradictory. When we put them all together, we can see that they're complementary. We can see that one helps to understand the next, and they all bring to the same direction. So what I wanted to get to is that we shouldn't take Buddhism as, how can I say, something, we shouldn't look at it as something that we need to belong to, or some kind of religion or tradition that I need to belong to, or that I belong to or not. But mostly, I see it as a world view that I can learn and then apply in my life. I need to transform. My objective is, my objective is, as Buddhist, is that so my worldview becomes as similar, it constantly transforms to follow the follow the worldview of Buddhist. I know it would be much easier if I just said being Buddhist means belonging to a group. There is this aspect of identity. I'm Buddhist, I'm not Buddhist. We are what we are, independently of the name that we're going to give it. In reality, being Buddhist, there are two aspects. In Tibetan, it's called speaking Tibetan. Nambe, the people who follow the Buddhist life philosophy, and those who follow um, the life philosophy means that one starts following the world view, like what is happiness, what is suffering, how, what is reality, what am I, what is the I, and one tries to adapt. The one takes into consideration that worldview, and then another person could be also integrates the conduct, not just a worldview. So then, and so the worldview is adapted to every moment of one's life. Uh, So now let's try to understand a little bit this worldview. Even if to do it really well, and I invite you all to do, it's not easy and it's not immediate either. I invite you to observe and gradually clarify what your worldview is. Let's try for a minute just to distance ourselves and see ourselves from the outside and see what are the influences that 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 bring us to live life the way we're living it. What were we taught as children? What examples were we given? Within our familial context, what are the worldviews that have been transmitted to us? The example that I've always given is this example of pink and blue color. And I was reflecting on this a few days ago. For example, of pink and blue, if we were to ask, what's the color for baby girls? Pink or blue? Is pink. Just look at my puppy. If she has a pink collar, she's female. Instead of a baby boy should wear blue. And if we were asked why, our answer would be because that's the way it is. Pink is for girls and blue is for boys. I mean, do we need to think about that, or does it just come does it come spontaneously? Even I mean, this actually this actually comes from something that happened in 1918 at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. This is when dyed fabric became accessible, as were before. It was extremely expensive because before, boys or girls, what color did they wear? Beige. And you would dress them in beige because it was the natural color of the, and it was a little gray beige. It was less expensive. And only those who used dyed fabrics were the very wealthy. Instead, when dyed fabrics became available, this in 1918, there was the first marketing, to teach people, what kind of what colors they should be wearing, and based on like French nobility. And men in the French nobility wore pink because it was seen as a stronger color, and baby blue was seen as something very soft. So in 1918, so children's clothing were sold blue for girls and pink for boys. After 2 years, people weren't used to buying clothes every 6 months, but but for the market to go ahead, they needed to find a reason, an excuse to get people to buy more. So they inverted the color system. So in 1920, they did a new marketing campaign. Now pink was for girls and baby blue was for boys. Obviously, they couldn't do that every 6 months. So now it's been 100 years, more than 100 years, and we are fixed with this idea. This is a very simple example about how we transmit concepts one to the next without even knowing it. And so, but what I'd like to touch on just briefly, what I was reflecting on the other day, is that we try every once in a while to free ourselves from concepts that are given to us, transmitted to us, but we're not able, because when we try to free ourselves from concepts, we're still creating new ones. For example, today there's you know there's a whole movement of gender equality, where you say, okay, but there's no difference between boys and girls, or everything was just created by society. I don't want to get too into this, but what we're doing is we're taking away one concept and we're adding another. We're not able to perceive or relate to something independently from our own view, this concept that we are going to attribute. I don't know if this is clear, what I'm trying to get to. So an important process to do is to observe oneself as if we were looking from outside, and we ask ourselves, what are the fundamental pillars of my worldview? And this is not easy. I repeat it also because we're not used to observing and analyzing. But what are our principal influences? So one strong influence from the point of view of a strong influence would be monotheistic religions. There are aspects of our worldview that are influenced by capitalism, and other aspects that are influenced by a reality, a kind of materialistic, Newtonian material mechanics, like the mechanics of Newton. And then we also have different aspects, for example, just an example of something that seems spontaneous and natural, but it's actually something that was taught to us, and this is a novelty for humans, which is the perception of time. Time as we live it today, which is, there's there's a perception that there's absolute time, and we try to represent it through a clock or a watch. I mean, it was something that was invented by Newton. Time before was lived completely differently. Here we're not here to talk about time, but it's something that seems spontaneous and natural, when instead it's not. When it's something that was transmitted to us within a social context. So at the basis, to be able to understand the view of Buddha, we need to understand what our view is, and so that we can live our reality through our awareness. I mean, because if we were not, didn't have this awareness, then we'll never be ready to change it. So what happens is, I live my reality through my worldview, but in my experience, I believe that reality that I'm perceiving, I believe that is the reality, the reality is like that. I mean, this is how we live reality. When we see another person, we expect that person to see things the way we do, but that person has had different experiences and so has a different basis. But when we see reality, we're not aware that what I'm seeing is my version. For example, when I see another person, when I see you, for example, am I seeing you or not? Yes. I think yes. But when we see each other, you think that you're seeing me, right? But are you seeing me or are you seeing your version of me? Am I seeing you or am I seeing my version of you? I see I see my version of you, which is not you. You are not my version of you. And that's like that for everything. I mean, if we imagine, for example, oh, I saw that person. No, 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 you didn't see that person. You saw your version of that person. So, which is not the person. I saw that person. We saw two different people because I saw my version. I mean, it seems a little bit strange. But at the base, it's important to understand that we perceive reality through our own experiences, our own worldview, etc. And what I see, what I perceive, is not reality, the soul reality in an autonomous, independent, objective, absolute way, but is the fruit of my past experiences and my present perceptions and this interaction with the world around me. It's not independent of any of that. I don't know if that's clear. Starting from that, starting from that, from that, that starting, our starting point of being aware of the fact that we are living within our own world paradigm, because at that point that allows us, it gives us space to look from a different perspective. It gives us the opportunity to change, transform, and here we open ourselves up to other people's perspectives. Like, he'll give you a very common example. For example, so let's say that once I drank from a yellow glass and I was sick. That never happened. But let's let's say that once I did drink water from a yellow glass and got sick, and that generated fear of drinking from a yellow glass. And then I I see someone drinking from a yellow glass and who's not afraid, and I'm aware that my fear of drinking from a yellow glass is just a result of my past experience, and I see someone else who's not afraid of drinking from water from a yellow glass. Then at that point I can open up to change. But instead, if I see if I think that yellow glass is dangerous, and I see somebody who has a different point of view or does it differently, I say, you are wrong. So we need to start from this basis of say, I have my own experience, but it's not absolute. I have my way of perceiving reality, but it's not absolute. Some, in some ways it works, in other ways it doesn't. The starting point and one of the fundamental pillars of the worldview that Buddha transmitted, which is the basis of everything else, the rules of conduct, the practices of meditation, etc. It starts from four fundamental points that are called the four seals of Buddhism, and we're not going to open all four seals here because it's it's a lot. But just very briefly, the first one, it says everything, all composed phenomena are impermanent. The second one, dukkhatam. Sorry, the second, Sijila, everything that is impure is of the nature of suffering. The third one says all phenomenon lack their lack lack of self existence and are and 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 lack intrinsic existence. And the fourth one is beyond suffering there is peace. So without getting into all of it, but let's start with take one fundamental point of Buddha's worldview, which that I think is one of the most important keys for all of us. The the energy, the force, that pushes us to do everything we do is desire, and the opposite of desire, which is aversion. These two energies are two manifestations of the same thing. It's really interesting that sometimes two extremes are often much closer than we think, and they can even be the the manifestation of the same thing. We have attraction and aversion. These are the two energies that push us to do everything we do. It's what has brought us here today. It's it's what gets us out of the bed in the morning and have us and eat breakfast or do the job that we do, or to hug our children or family members. I mean, even from the simplest to the most complex things, it's attraction and aversion that pushes us. We have attraction to that which we think is going to bring us happiness and well-being, and we have aversion to what we think is going to make us suffer. So believing, even on a conceptual level and on a non-conceptual level, there's certain things that we project our happiness onto some things in a spontaneous way, and sometimes or sometimes in a conceptual way, like so somebody told me like this, we don't really know why. Hmm? You know? So and same thing for and something for for our aversion and fear of suffering. These two concepts, these two forces of what it makes us, what makes us happy, and what um, keeps us from avoiding suffering. So Buddha asked the same question, and so his answers, his answer came traditionally in what we call the Four Noble Truths, which are part of the second seal. Well, actually, a little bit together, but anyway, these four questions are: what is suffering? And by suffering, we mean what should I avoid in my life? What do I not want? Why do I suffer? Second question. And the third question, what is happiness? And the fourth, what should I do to not suffer and to be happy? It's easy, isn't it? But we need to understand that if we've ever asked these questions, if we've ever asked these questions, we already have the answers in our lives. I mean, we have already spontaneous answers of what is suffering, everything we want to avoid, everything that we don't like, for everything for which we have aversion. That's what we think generates suffering, and we connect it. We connect that suffering with something, and it's where we project the causes of suffering, or do we just think that suffering comes from nothing, or are we pointing the finger at someone or something? We do, don't we? I mean, do we want to be happy? Yes. Do we have an idealized image? Oh, I will be happy, when I'm like this. I mean, we have our own image of, and we connect. We connect it with something, don't we? And in our daily life, we're constantly trying to avoid suffering and obtaining these objects of happiness. So these four questions are already present in our daily lives. We already have the answers too. So very briefly, let's try to see what the answers, what are the answers that apply to most people, where we are today. Because Buddha's answers is really quite different. Following Buddha's example means walking against the current. But it, but if it works, I mean, if our view worked, then we would just go with the flow. But so what's our view? We recognize suffering as being two different types, like physical suffering and mental suffering. So we have suffering of the body, which means pain, hot, cold, hunger, thirst. That's physical suffering. And then we have mental suffering, fear, anxiety, dissatisfaction, and all these inner states, all these inner states that we want to end. But what we call suffering is a sensation, is this feeling of suffering. So the feeling of suffering is an inner experience that when it comes, we want it to end. We want it to end as soon as possible, and we don't want it to come back. This is the definition of the feeling of suffering. It's an inner sensation through which we experience the objects and the reality around us. And when it happens, we want it to end as soon as possible, and we don't want it to come back. And suffering for us is mostly this. Why do we suffer? When we suffer, what's important is that the answer should not be found conceptually. It's something that has been taught. But in my daily life, where am I pointing the finger? Normally, we point the finger because we're missing something, or we can't get what we want, or because there's a situation that we don't like. And because it's hot, or because this one said this, or because that's missing, or because that person acts in this way, because the government is like this, or that government is like that. And we always have a reason for, always have a reason. We can always connect a situation or person or something to that suffering. Where are we pointing the finger? We're pointing the finger in the world around us, don't we? Mostly it's like this. What happens when we have a feeling of suffering and we can't find an external reason? I mean, it happens, often it generates even more anxiety, as if there were no way out. It's almost easier to suffer having something material to point the finger at than when that's missing, because it brings to that third point. What's happiness? If we were to close our eyes for a minute and imagine, where do I project my happiness? I mean, what would be a really happy life for me? I would like my body to be like this. I mean, do we project our happiness onto our body? I'd say yes. Huh? I'm skinny. I'd like to be a little heavier. I am short. I'd like to be tall. If I'd like to have a yogic mind. So we have all these different things. Oh, have you have you have you ever projected your happiness onto the people around you? Oh, to be happy, I wish that this person close to me, I wish this person had more patience, who could really see me the way the way I see myself, who could love me, who really loved me for who I am, who did everything the way I wanted. I, I wish that the world was like this. So the world should be like this. I mean, we do project our happiness um, onto situations and people and material things around us, and we have our idealized image, where we think that if the world were in a certain way, I would be happy, and consequently, daily we put our energy um, for the world to be the way I project it. So it's just an infinite battle to um, to try to make my material world the way I want it, and the people around me to be the way I want them to be. Constantly of trying to avoid um, suffering and gaining objects of attraction and pleasure. And this is not a new problem at the time of Buddha that was like this, and I imagine even before. But Buddha Shakyamuni at a certain point, by observing all of this, and he found a different way, and it worked for him, and and he's shared with us. So let's try to analyze a little bit. Let's start from that first point. What is suffering? Let's remember that when we talk about suffering, we're not talking about the feeling of suffering. We're talking about that which should be avoided, that which doesn't sustain a state of well-being, that which we want to avoid. The the metaphor given is given the sickness. The sickness says that the metaphor says that the sickness is to know and the causes are to be abandoned. And medicine is to be taken, and the state of health should be reached. This is a verse from a sutra, not a sutra, an important text called Lama in Tibetan. Anyway, the simplified translation is the sickness should be known. The causes should be abandoned, and the path of healing is the medicine or the treatment is to be followed, and the state of health is to be reached. This shows us four aspects. First of all, we need to understand what is the sickness. We need to recognize the sickness as a sickness. Secondly, I need to understand what the causes of the sickness are. And once I have identified them, I need to abandon them. And the third one, I need to follow a treatment where I need to put my energy into something that opposes the sickness to then reach a state of balance and health. But to do that, you know, once I've recognized the sickness, I also need to recognize my potential and ability to be healed, or to heal. Because if I didn't believe in my own ability to heal, then I would just need to avoid symptoms. If you can recognize the sickness but not recognize the ability to heal, I mean, this happens a lot in our society. I see the sickness because I see the symptoms, but I don't have an image of what health is. So I spend my life trying to avoid the symptoms. These are two very different things. I just think about a relationship with somebody else or in society. So one thing is every time there's conflict, you don't live the conflict, but you go beyond the conflict. But another thing is constructing a healthy relationship. They're two very different things. One thing is recognizing what is not going well in our society and trying to avoid those things, and it's something else is having an idealized image of of a society the way I want it to be, and and asking how we can get there. So one thing is avoiding the symptoms of sickness, another thing is constructing health. So it's very important that that we don't just recognize the sickness, but we also need to have a clear idea of this state of health that we need to reach. Unfortunately, today we're just not used to seeing a state of good health. We're used to trying to avoid symptoms. Even that's the way our medicine works. I have a lot of I have a lot of I'm like everything. There are positive and negative aspects, and I, I, I have a lot of esteem for Western medicine, but there are also negative aspects, you know. But unfortunately, we're always trying to just resolve a problem, or you know, when you know, in when you study medicine, what I see, I never studied myself, but we do you study the states of happiness, states of health, or do you study pathologies? Mostly, they're the sicknesses that are studied, and know where they come from and how to eliminate the sicknesses. But eliminating the sickness doesn't necessarily mean reach a state of good health. They're two different things. So it's very important for us to have an idea of what a healthy body is, and this healthy body needs to be sustained and cultivated daily for it to exist. What does a healthy mind exist? Shouldn't wait to have a mental pathology to then take care of my mind, because we have this idea that to take care of the mind, one goes to a psychiatrist or psychologist when one has some kind of mental pathology. No, one needs to take care of one's mind, have a healthy mind before these sicknesses arise. I always remember this image. It was a friend of Dr. Anton Jayasurya was a friend of Lama Ganshin's who did also acupuncture. He was an amazing person. Lama Ganshin would invite him would would invite him to conferences. He was from Sri Lanka. There was another one, Dr. Trivelli. I mean, they were just two encyclopedias. And when they would begin talking, it was impossible to stop them. They would just talk for hours and hours. Maybe someone here has knew them, met them, and he was an amazing person, and he developed his own techniques of acupuncture and constructed hospitals in Sri Lanka. And in one of these conferences once, I remember he gave this example that in ancient China, in about 3,000 years ago, the doctors were paid when people were healthy. So imagine, like today, there are family doctors, general doctors, family doctors, and the doctor would be paid by every family as long as they were healthy. When once someone was sick, then they wouldn't pay the doctor. So the doctors would go from family to family and work on preventative medicine and encourage healthy lifestyles. Like before winter would come, they would go to people's homes and try to encourage a certain diet or certain lifestyle. I mean, just imagine im, im, imagine if that system were it worked today for us. I imagine that the doctors would get together and create a kind of lobby to make sure that many products would be eradicated or taken off the market because they are obviously they're obviously dangerous for the health. I have great respect for doctors. I just you, anyway, both both systems have to do with how they relate with the people and with sickness, but not just from not just sick, not just for medicine. As children, from we've always been taught how to resolve problems, and not encouraged to construct a more perfect reality. So because so ideally, um, we should have an idea of what our ideal is and move towards that and move in that direction. So I'm going to like the relationship I have with someone. What kind of relationship do I want to have with that person? Have an ideal there, then and move towards in that direction, or anything in our life, like the job that we have. We just imagine how we want it to be, like the best version, and how I can do to create that. And it's one of the fundamental points of Buddha's view is about believing in our potential. So when we recognize the sickness, we need to also be able to recognize our own potential for healing, our own potential for perfect health. So the first one, recognizing the sickness, according to Buddhist philosophy, this metaphor of sickness is not just the feeling of suffering, but they're all things that when they are sustained, they generate suffering. So we have the suffering of suffering that we recognize as suffering. We have fake antidotes, those things, where we project our happiness, but that it cannot be sustained in reality. And we have also this this state of basis that generates suffering. So let's take for example um, a swing or a seesaw. So the seesaw, we go up and down. Gangorra in Portuguese. I just I remember as a child here in Italy, I've never um, gotten on top of a seesaw. I was calling it before swing, but I think it's the right name is a seesaw. What happens with when one goes up and then one goes down? You go up and down, up and down. Let's just imagine our life as being on top of a seesaw. Sometimes we're up, oh, it's so nice, we feel good. And then we're times when we're down, where we have these feelings of suffering. And we spend most of our life putting effort so to make the seesaw go up, you know. But sometimes we're up and we just don't even have the time to enjoy it. We're just too worried. We're just too worried about it coming down again. It's like the last 2 days of vacation. I've never understood this. You just have a few days of vacation time, and it's so beautiful to be on vacation. Just enjoy it to the last minute. And not that when it starts, oh, the day after tomorrow I need to leave. Oh, I'm so sorry to not have any more, to not have more vacation time. Well, given that you have just um, just a few days of vacation, then enjoy it. But your seesaw's starting to come down, and you're already starting to suffer. So there are moments where we're high up on the seesaw, and we say, wonderful, but when it's up, then inevitably, sooner or later, it's going to come down. And when we're down, we want to go back up. And we spend our lives doing this. When the seesaw is down, this represents the suffering of mind and body. And when it's up, it's when we have sensations that are pleasurable and of well-being, given um, um, but based on conditions and like situations that cannot actually sustain that happiness. Let's take another example. If I'm very thirsty and I'm suffering, I'm low on the seesaw, I drink water and I go back and I'm up on the seesaw. If I keep drinking water, the the more I drink, the more water I drink, does it help hold the seesaw up, or does it actually push down? I mean, the feeling of pleasure when I drink the water, is it sustainable? Does it increase? Does it increase, or does it start decreasing? It decreases so much that it starts to create suffering. Or for example, if I see someone I haven't seen for a long time, that someone I love that person, and so the seesaw goes up, and I see that person, I'm very happy, and the seesaw goes up. But then I spend 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with that person, then the seesaw gradually starts coming down, because that initial happiness cannot be sustained. Or I get money, for example, or something material. The seesaw goes up, but then when I'm in contact, with those material things, like the car. Oh, what a beautiful car that I have, But then I see that someone else has a more beautiful car, So it's not sustaining the seesaw, it's gonna come down. Or someone compliments me, for example, the seesaw goes up, But then, and do we stay with that same? If it does it does that compliment hold the seesaw up? Is it enough to hold the seesaw up, or then do we need more? No, we'll need more, and it'll come down again. So we're constantly looking for situations and conditions to keep the seesaw up. But whether it's up or whether it's down, it's of the same nature. When it goes up, inevitably it's going to come down. So this first aspect that the Buddha said about suffering is that, whether the seesaw is up or down, it's the same. They're two different moments of the same suffering. And this is a huge shock for us, because our life is dedicated at keeping the seesaw up. And Buddha said, no, it's useless, because no matter how much effort you put into keeping it up, it's going to come down. And then it'll go up again, and then it's going to come down again. So Buddha says to us, the problem is not that the seesaw comes down. The problem is being on the seesaw. So the this this suffering, this feeling of suffering, is when the seesaw is down. And the second type of suffering that Buddha named is called the suffering of change, which is like when the seesaw is up, because it can be pleasurable, but it cannot sustain that happiness. The third type of suffering is called all-permeating suffering. So using the same metaphor, is about being on the seesaw. So as long as you're on the seesaw, no matter, it's, whether you're up or you're down, you know. So if when you're up, it's going to come down. It's our body and our mind that is polluted by all our mental defilements and by the actions that we have committed in the past, that have created this karmic inertia. As long as I'm taken by my traumas, by my ignorance, by my aversion, by my dissatisfaction, etc., inevitably, sooner or later, I'm going to suffer. So, keeping this same metaphor as before, the objective is not keeping the seesaw up. The objective is getting off the seesaw if we want. So, thinking thinking that our objective thinking that our objective is to keep the seesaw up is being an infantile being, being a samsaric being, and as this inner, being a samsaric being, this inner cycle of mental defilements, of ignorance, attachment, and anger, etc., and the actions that are committed based on these mental defilements, that one gets trapped in this cycle. But that we can use the same metaphor as like being on the seesaw. So what is suffering? It's not just this feeling of suffering. What we need to avoid is projecting happiness onto things when everything's fine, when everything's well, because it cannot be sustained. And here I'm going to add something important. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing negative or bad about material things or sensory pleasures or one's image. These are not the causes of suffering that should be abandoned. They're simply we just project onto these things a value that they do not have. don't, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with eating what you like or having sensory pleasures or having things or being recognized for something. There's nothing wrong with any of that. What's the problem is that these things cannot sustain the value that we attribute to them. They cannot sustain a state of happiness. It's just an illusion of happiness. And from this, so we have the suffering, the suffering of change, and the all-permeating suffering. It's a fundamental point of the vision. Buddhist vision is seeing is seeing all permeating suffering as suffering. So, for example, we see sickness as a symptom, when instead, and even if the symptom is not manifest, doesn't mean that I'm healed. Because sickness is a lack of inner balance. Oh, there's some kind of imbalance that generates a symptom. Normally, we see the symptom as a sign, as suffering. Buddha says no. The sickness is not just a symptom. Even when the symptom is not manifest, it doesn't mean that you are healed. The sickness is the virus that's inside. It's this imbalance in this or that. So this first step is seeing the sickness as sickness, having the correct diagnosis. Because even on a physical sickness, I mean, to be able to heal correctly, we need to have a right diagnosis. So, sickness and symptom are two different things. But when we have a headache, for example, what do we do when we have a headache? We just take a pill, a little massage, or do we try to understand, where does this pain come from? Maybe because maybe I didn't sleep well. Maybe it was something I ate, or is it, why do I have? Is it my posture? Is this my cervical spine? So this first step Buddha tells us that it's not enough just to recognize the symptom. We need to recognize the sickness. Not just the symptom, but the sickness. Remember that symptoms are very important because the symptoms show us that there is an illness. For example, in a relationship with someone else, at a certain point there's some kind of conflict. This is a symptom. Means that there's somewhere there is the sickness. There is the lack of balance somewhere, and it's not enough. It's not enough just to eliminate the symptom. You need to try to understand really at the basis what is wrong with us or relationships with others. Yeah. Generally, this it's this first principle is that it's not enough just to recognize the symptom, but you need to recognize the sickness. And once we have recognized the sickness, we need to know what generates that illness, because no matter how much no matter how much I try to heal, if I keep sustaining the sickness itself, I'm never going to heal. If, for example, if there's something in my lifestyle or something in my diet, no matter how much medicine I take, but I keep my old lifestyle or my old diet, that encourages the sickness, I'm never going to heal. And if we go to a doctor, maybe, you know, the doctor maybe gives us some kind of medicine to take, but, you know, and we rely too much on the doctor to take away our sickness, and we don't want to change our lifestyle. A doctor can't heal you. So the sickness should be known, and the causes are to be abandoned. And here we come into what Lama Ganchen taught in 1987, or 89. I'm a little bit, you may be a little confused here, but it was the second time that Lama Ganchen came to Brazil. And my mother, at the time, she organized Lama's visit and said, Rinpoche, we should do a kind of workshop. Because today, people like workshops, people, and we need to give it a title. And it was the first time that Rinpoche used formally the term self-healing. And he gave these teachings, and they were transcribed as the book in Self-Healing 1, where, where he talked about really recognize our real friends and who are our fake friends. Just to be able to then recognize them so you can abandon them. In other words, there are things that are harmful to us, but we live them as if they benefit us. At the time, he gave the example of coffee. And I think after a few years, he just gave up. He gave up on that example. It was too hard. But he would say, for example, because what are our main difficulties that we have in the modern world is anxiety, and things are just too fast moving, and coffee increases that anxiety. The reason why I've never had coffee in my life. No, that's a lie. I had it once. I tried it. It's because as a child, I grew up with my parents who were always trying to not drink coffee because Rinpoche Lama Ganchen said coffee's bad for you. You shouldn't drink coffee. And I grew up with them, seeing how difficult it was for them to not drink coffee. And I remember hearing them say, "Oh, if I don't drink coffee, I get a headache. If I don't drink it, I can't stay awake." And so as a child, I said to myself, "Why would I ever start drinking coffee?" Once tasted, I tasted the coffee of my mother's without sugar, and it just was horrible. And so I have my concept. If the body is tired, then the body needs to rest. So if I'm a little sleepy after eating, what I need to do is to is to help my body digest and not give the body some kind of false energy, because the energy the energy that coffee gives is a kind of fake energy. I don't understand too much about diet and but coffee aside, if there's something that is bad for me, even if it's pleasurable, it should be abandoned. So in the second passage is understanding what is it about our way of doing and speaking and thinking that that generates suffering, because our suffering, even if we project around the world around us, Buddha says no, the suffering is not caused by the context in which you find yourself. It's caused by the way you interact with the world. We're strongly influenced by our surroundings. I'm not saying that we're not, but what happens is that our surroundings is also a fruit of our own choices and our way of interacting with our with the reality in which the reality of now is a fruit of our own choices and the actions that we have done. So we don't have control over our surroundings too much in this present moment, or rather, the, the way someone, the way someone, do I have control over the way someone else interacts or acts, or if it's cold or hot, or what is happening in society around me. I mean, how much control do I have over that? Just I have, I can control only my own actions, and if I'm part of a society, if I make a change, I'm changing everything. But I don't have control over the people around me, or the to the environment around me. I don't. Also, because each one of us is conditioned by his own, we're conditioned by our own choices, by our own experiences of the past. But in this present moment, where we're conditioned, where we're conditioned by inner and outer conditions, by our body and our our inner conditions come from our body and our past decisions, and the outer conditions is for those around us. But we can choose how we interact. So this interaction in this present moment creates new causes for what's going to happen in the future. You come to me and you say something to me, for example. I can react in many different ways. I mean, how I act is going to create my present moment, and I have the interaction with the other, and it's going to create this kind of inertia. It's going to give a future fruit result. So we're constantly constructing, we're constantly experiencing the past and constructing our future. So the key point in all of this is that we have a consciousness. Because if we didn't have consciousness, we would be a constant we would be constantly reacting, and we wouldn't have this freedom. Instead, we have this ability that in front of a situation, I do like this or I do like that. A stone, for example, interacts with the world around it, but if you interact with the stone in a certain way, you will always have that same reaction. For example, there's a person here who works, who there's a man, construction worker here, who's working on the temple, and he really knows stone. He knows how to break stone, and knows that if you do this, that, and the other, you're always going to have that same reaction. But just imagine a stone is in a bad mood, and today I'm just not, or I'm just not going to break apart, or I'm going to just break apart when you don't want me to. It would be very different. Why is it easier to be with plants than it is to be with than people? Because plants react always in the same way all the time. This is the difference also between living beings and sentient beings. A living being interacts with its surrounding world, but it interacts always in the same way with very precise rules. And these rules can change, you know, they can change over time, but they're very coherent. They correspond perfectly. A sentient being is also living, so has biological rules on how to act, how it reacts and acts, but it, but there's a part of choice there. Go, don't go. I like it, I don't like it. And this is the difference between a living and a sentient being. All sentient beings are also living beings. But there's this difference. Sentient beings have have feelings, they have attraction, aversion, and pleasure and pain, and living beings do not. So we are sentient beings, and every situation that we live, there's a part that we react to spontaneously, and then there's also a part where we can make a choice. Do I follow this thought or not? Do I show this feeling in words or not? Do I go? Do I not go? We have this choice, and this is where we can find our freedom. And what Buddha explained, at least what I understood, based what I was told, because what Buddha actually said, I don't know. I can only say what I've understood, based on my own understanding. Buddha told us that which generates suffering are not the conditions in which we find ourselves, but it's the way in which we interact with the world. From the point of view of our emotions, of our actions, and in body, speech, and mind, this is what generates suffering, and this should be an enormous relief, because if the cause of suffering were my surroundings, then it would be impossible to not suffer, because the world around us, you finish one problem and another one begins. Have you ever seen a perfectly harmonious context? Even because, for there to be harmony among people means that you need to have harmony among the mental defilements of everyone. Even when we see all political systems that have been developed over in history, but as long as there's selfishness and attachment and aversion, there'll be conflict in society. And trying to create a perfect world is just impossible. So when I'm able to understand for myself, I say my suffering is not caused by this my surroundings, this context in which I find myself, even if I'm living my suffering through these surroundings. But these are the conditions, but not the cause. The causes always come before. An example, following the same metaphor, for a long time ago, and a few days ago, I discovered I'm not like this anymore. It made me happy. But if I am in a cold place with bare feet, then I get a lot of pain. I used to get a lot of pain, and the reason for my pain was it because my feet were cold, or is there a different imbalance in my body? So the so the cold feet were just a condition through which a sickness would manifest. So in reality, so so to avoid that, to to avoid that kind of suffering, it was not enough just to keep my feet warm. I needed to also cultivate cul- to cultivate the health, But a few days ago, I saw, I've always been really afraid of having cold feet or walking barefoot on a cold surface, um, um, and and then and then a few days ago, I was walking in the mountains, and on the way back, um, I needed to cross a little stream, and I put my foot in the wrong place, and I fell into the stream, or I got my feet really, really wet, and then I was really afraid. I thought, well, my feet are wet, my feet are really wet, and I was really afraid of then having pain. But at that moment, I said, this is, let's have a new image, a new reality of myself where um, I'm not going to have pain now from these cold feet. And what's true, actually, it's years now that I've been taking care of my health, you know, and so actually, even with two wet feet and having to walk for another hour and a half, I didn't feel any pain. So now I generated a new image of myself that I do not fear having cold feet. So my point is, one thing is the cause and another thing is the condition. So if someone speaks to me in a certain way and I get upset and I react with suffering, what happened was a conditioned, why I got upset from what that person said normally is because it's it's touching points, open wounds or past, it activates some kind of past trauma or something that we haven't completely digested in the past. So it's important to know that causes come before the condition. And Buddha explained to us that causes of our suffering are our anger, our jealousy, our unlimited attachment, our unlimited desire, our dissatisfaction, our fear, arrogance, miserliness, selfishness, with uh, this obsession with self-gratification, our inability to see others, to, to see anything beyond ourselves, and deeply at the basis, our own ignorance, not under ignorance of not seeing the relationship there's between cause and result. You know, so in the present moment, when we're experiencing a result, we're not able to understand what the causes were, or in our present, we're not able to understand that what we're doing, what future results are going to be, you know. And then also this ignorance of relating to the world as if it were objective when instead it's subjective. So relating to the world in an objective way, when it's subjective, is ignorance, or we live in an impermanent world that appears to us as being permanent, and we relate to this impermanent world as being permanent. And this is another form of ignorance. These are at the root of our suffering. Together with these so-called mental defilements, there's this inertia of our past actions, this so-called karma. Karma literally, it doesn't mean destiny, it means action. Karma is this inertia, this energy of body, speech, and mind. Our actions, what I live today is a result of my emotions, of my inner states of being, of my choices, together with the strength of the strength and this karmic inertia of the past. And so what I'm going to live tomorrow is going to be the result of my emotions and my feelings and choices, and the strength that those actions generate, this so-called karma. The context in which I live is a result of my past actions, and the way I live this context is the result of my inner conditionings and mental and emotions. We cannot eliminate all karmic forces of the past. It's impossible. And this is one of the main differences between a Buddhist worldview and a Hindu worldview. I can't talk about Hinduism because I don't know it very well, but I have I, I have I have had debate also with some followers of Hinduism, although even the word Hinduism is insufficient because there's so many traditions of Hinduism. Um, Sometimes, so one tradition can say that there's one tradition says that it's possible to not suffer by not generating karma, that one should stay in a state like kind of stopped state, kind of instead, in Buddhism, it says that's impossible because as long as you exist, you are constantly interacting. You're constantly interacting, and you can't eliminate the past inertia. But the suffering doesn't come only from karma, this past inertia, but also from the mental defilements. So the solution is not eliminating karma, which is not possible, but the solution is eliminating the mental defilements. And from here we get to the third question: what is happiness? Happiness, according to this view that Buddha transmitted, doesn't come from something outside, but it's an inner state of being. It's an inner state of satisfaction, of balance, of peace. And to understand a little bit this, let's try to do an exercise. Just for a minute, just imagine your life, our lives, with in all aspects. The body that we have today, with all of its beauties and difficulties, the family situation in which we find ourselves, the the job we have, the job we don't have, the economic situation we have, the social situation. Let's try to observe our lives in all of its subtleties. Now, so our life with all the different aspects, we try to imagine for a minute. Let's try to imagine with the same life as it is, but with some differences. Where 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 we don't have any expectations that anyone else should be different from what they are, or what would our life be like if we could accept the other, which there are no more conflicts because a person did something or didn't do something. What would our life be like if we were able to live our present moment and were um, no longer enchained by our our past on what happened or what didn't happen, or um, or even tied to what we think, um, how things we not tied to these expectations of how we think things should be, or if we didn't have any dissatisfaction, what would our life be like if we knew how to live things that are impermanent as being impermanent, or just were able to live in perfect harmony with ourselves and everything, if we could live without anger, without fear, without anxiety, without jealousy, without dissatisfaction, and consequently, we lived our lives with a deep sense of peace, balance, satisfaction, connected to everyone, heart to heart, able to see everybody. If we're able to imagine our lives with these changes, then we understand a little bit better what nirvana is. It's not reaching a state of the body, um, and it's about reaching a deep inner state of harmony with ourselves and others, of balance and peace that allows us to live every and any situation well, in harmony. And this is the object, our objective of happiness given to us by Buddha. Because getting an object, obtaining an object of desire is an illusion of happiness, because you'll never be able to get everything you want, and reality is never going to be exactly the way you project it to. Imagine, imagine, imagine if we just pro- imagine that we just projected our happiness on, like, imagine a world the way we want it, and then we could just phrase it like that and say, okay, this is how I want it, and now I have it. That would be easy, but it's not like that, because now we want a beautiful red car, and you get your red car, but then you don't want your red car anymore. Now you want a blue car, or I want to have the company of this person or of these people, Now I have it, but then we change. Now I want to be alone, you know. Why? Why is it that when we're with people, we want to be alone, and when we're alone, we want to be with people? Because we're constantly projecting onto the world our dissatisfactions. It's like the game, the joke I said when I'm a child. When I touch my head, it hurts. When I touch my knee, it hurts. When I touch my chest, it hurts. But my problem is it's my finger that's hurting. The problem isn't being alone or being with people. The problem is my own dissatisfaction and projecting my happiness onto an idealized view of the world around me. And this is a radical paradigm change. This is what I meant before when I said we go against the current, because the paradigm in which we live, we, um, our state of happiness and well-being is based on based on external conditions. Instead, Buddha says our happiness and well-being depends on our inner state of being, you know. So I can't change the world around me, but if I change, if I change how I live inside, how I live things inside, then with that change, I'm able to change the whole, to the whole world. So suffering is not just when the seesaw is down, but also when it's up. The causes of suffering are not the conditions around me, but are my own actions and my mental states of being, my own mental conditionings. The state of happiness and well-being it doesn't depend on anything external, but on an inner state of being. And the fourth point, it is possible to reach the state of peace because we our mind is malleable, and the more I do something, the easier it becomes. As Shantideva said in the Bodhisattva Charvatara, this important text, he said, there is nothing that is not easy once you're used to it. The more we repeat something, the easier it becomes. The more I react in a certain way, the more spontaneous it becomes to act like that. You know, regardless of what it is, physically too. You know, just to, if you want to do, if you want to to gain muscles, you need to repeat certain exercises. If you want to learn how to play a musical instrument, this is something that I would have liked to have done, but I never had a real opportunity to do something. But I have great esteem for musicians. If I want to learn how to play a violin, for example, it's tiresome how to hold it, keep the position, and it hurts like this. I mean, I imagine I've never tried. I've never tried. I've never tried anyway. Just there's a story of the violin from one of our friends from the Sangha. He, he's he Francesco, when we um, so he actually there's this man who from our sangha. He wanted he wanted to help with the temple, but he said that he he built, he made a violin, a beautiful, to then sell to raise money for the temple. But the person who actually bought the violin can't travel yet, and so I still have the violin. So I've touched that violin, but I've never tried to play. So, but I imagine that, in spite of it being very difficult at the beginning, that gradually it becomes easier. But surely here there's somebody who knows how to play a violin, or no? Yes? No. No. Any other instruments, like guitar, something? The piano? So what happens is that, I mean, how much time do you have to spend actually practicing and playing the piano for your hand for the piano to become an extension of your hands? I mean, you need a lot of time. At the beginning, it's difficult. You have to repeat. I just go on and on and on. Repeat. It becomes it becomes easier and easier, more and more spontaneous, And here it is the same. And one of the key points of Buddhism is it's not only is it possible to learn how to play a musical instrument or learn how to drive or fly a plane, but we can teach ourselves how to we can educate ourselves emotionally. And this is a fundamental point of Buddhism. Our conduct, our way of interacting with the world from the inside, your inner world can be educated, our emotions. And in and where if suffering is so we need to cultivate the inner states. We need to cultivate the inner states of being that are beneficial and bring happiness and avoid the negative ones that are harmful. So, and to do this, we need to love ourselves. We need to love others and have the correct view of reality. This is the path. So a few weeks ago, we had 5 days of teachings of the three principal aspects of the path, and we deepened these topics. You know, you need a whole lifetime really to really look at it in depth. But in 5 days, we did something. So if someone were to ask me, what does it mean to be Buddhist? For me, it means first and foremost to do the best we can to transform my worldview in the one that was transmitted by Buddha and try to abandon what is harmful and cultivate what I see as beneficial according to what Buddha transmitted. As we said before, it's possible to file Buddhism from a philosophical point of view and a world view, but then one doesn't apply it in their daily lives. And then there's a possibility to also apply it to one's daily life, which is a very important step, I think. So, one fundamental aspect is the law of karma. It's said that there's a saying that says one starts practicing the Dharma, this path transmitted by Buddha, once the moment, once one believes deeply in and applies karma to his life and takes the law of karma very seriously and then applies that to one's conduct and daily life. What does that mean? In just a few words, it means I'm responsible for my own actions. The way in which I act and interact creates an inertia, creates an interdependence, that for which I myself am going to live the results. What I'm living in this present moment is a result of my choices of the path that are going to interact with the present and with my way of of of, of interacting. I'm not the victim of anyone. And that means that's already a lot. It's like a starting point is a starting point is do not victimize yourself. I think instead that that can be a problem. An example of victimizing ourselves would be we're always trying to point our finger. I'm upset because of this or because of that. But what happens is, the path is not spontaneous, and it's really it's going against the current. You know, what somebody could ask. You know, well, where did it all begin? I don't know, and it's not that important. You know, whether there was a beginning, if there's not a beginning. What I see sincerely, I mean, it's not important because I haven't been able to find an answer. And even, but even if I did have it, my real question is, what can I do to be happy? It's like when they asked Buddha of whether God existed or not. In that specific context, we're talking about, the creators of the universe, and Brahma and Indra and Vishnu, through the Vedic Indian views. And Buddha answered, I'm not here to tell you whether the gods exist or not. I am here to help you understand why you suffer and show you how you can not suffer anymore. More specifically, he said, I'm not here. I'm I'm not here to tell you if gods exist or not. I'm here to tell you that your happiness doesn't depend on anyone other than yourselves. So we can to show us how we can cultivate our happiness and abandon our suffering. I mean, in the end, that's what it's about. Because the beginning of the path starts from this the pre it starts from being able to welcome to be caring towards ourselves and direct ourselves. Even if we want to help somebody else, first we need to be caring with that person, listen to that person, and interact with that person so that that person can then help themselves. And for ourselves, we need to do the same, because if someone comes to me, someone who's not well, and I want that person to be well, but I expect that person to be something that is not. Let's take the example of the musical instrument as before. Someone comes, if someone suffers because they want to be able to play Beethoven and Bach, but they can't even do they can't even do da 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 da. It's the only thing I learned how to do on the piano, But I'd like to play this other music. Or someone who, you know, you do, so someone comes. The only way, the only way to help that person is to start where you are, and then gradually develop. But often we find someone who's not well, and we expect that person to be at our level, or to but of course that's not going to work. First we need to be caring towards ourselves, and then direct ourselves. And we need to do this the same with ourselves, Like I could say, oh, I've done so many hours of piano lessons, I should already know. But if you don't, you don't. So I need to adapt myself to the reality in which I find myself, for ourselves and for others. It's the same. I need to to need to really embrace. I need to embrace myself, because I am the result of all the experiences that I've lived in the past, and I shouldn't have the burden of being what I'm not. So first of all, we need to really embrace ourselves. And once I have embraced myself, then I have to give myself direction. I accept myself for what I am, but I direct myself to be different. Taking the metaphors before, okay, I accept that I'm not able to play the piano well, but since I want to play the piano well, I'm going to dedicate a couple hours a day. Maybe I'm going to look for someone who can teach me, and put energy in that direction. In this moment, we have strong conditionings. So starting from the root, are we able to see cause and condition? Are we able to see uh, uh, are we able to see what's impermanent as being impermanent, or do things appear as being permanent? For example, today we see each other, and then if we see each other tomorrow, or who do we think we're gonna meet? We think we're gonna meet the same person. So reality is impermanent, but it appears to us as being permanent, and we relate to reality in that way. This subjective reality appears to us as being objective. We live life through this filter of ourselves, and we are pretty incapable of seeing others. So, so we're selfish. We're obsessed with the I and the mind, aren't we? It's it's useless to put us in a place where we're not, where we're just where we aren't, you know. So we need to embrace. We're selfish, so we need to start from this selfish starting point, you know. So we say, oh, but I shouldn't be selfish. Well, that's true, but we need to start where we are, you know. The mm, you know, you need to begin where you are. First, we need to embrace ourselves, recognize where we are, then to 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 direct ourselves. So I'm selfish, but but am I obsessed with self gratification when I'm in a situation? What's my priority? Common good or the I and the mind? When I need to make a judgment, it's good or it's not good, it should be done or it shouldn't be done. What's my reference point? It's the I and the my, or the common good. It's the I and the my. So so I'm selfish. So let's just relax a little bit. We're selfish. Given that we're selfish and obsessed by my own happiness and my own well-being, but some would say, "Oh, I'm not selfish. My children mean more to me." No, they're your children, or your country, your religion. I mean, the my is an extension of the I. But given that we're selfish, let's do the job right. We're selfish. Great. It's fine. The first step on the path is, given that we're selfish, let's do the job right. Let's recognize what is harmful and abandon, and recognize what is good for us, and we cultivate it. And this means loving ourselves. And this is a fundamental point. One of the fundamental points, the second aspects, which is loving others, is it's possible only starting from the principle that selfishly speaking, it's better to be altruistic. Because I don't have another starting point. I don't have another starting point for becoming to be altruistic than being selfish. I mean, if they're two opposite things, how is it possible? They're not opposing. Altruism is not, it doesn't oppose selfishness. It, altruism is selfishness extended. I don't know if that's clear. If I see if I see altruism as being opposite of selfishness, then it means I see taking care of others or taking care of myself. But it's not like that. It's about including others. So selfishness is an enormous desire, an enormous desire for happiness and aversion towards suffering directed for ourselves. Altruism is this love towards other. The basis of what is called bodhicitta is where I'm able to include others, where I'm able to see the person, regardless of whoever they are, and I'm able to say your happiness is as important to me as my own. Your suffering is as important to me as my own. So altruism doesn't oppose selfishness. It's an extension where we include others, and that's why it's possible to become altruistic. Because if altruism were opposite to selfishness, then we wouldn't be able to develop it. Instead, when we see that it's a transformation and not an opposition of our selfishness, where we just need to include others, we see that it's possible, and gradually, along the path, one understands that the more the more obsessed I am with my own gratification, and the worse I am. And it's a long process, but we open our hearts and we see other people and go beyond our own needs and what I want, the I and the my, what I want, when I want it. We're really boring when we're able to go beyond. This is the second part of the path, the so-called bodhicitta, this, this, this path of being able, allowing ourselves to love others without excluding ourselves. And the third is about transforming our world view, and then transforming the way we react, we interact. We It means about relating to what is impermanent as being impermanent, what is subjective as being subjective. This is a deep and complex aspect, which I'm not going to open right now. To do all of this, there's a fundamental point. It's not enough to go against our mental defilements. We need to cultivate the antidote. We need to cultivate our qualities. Just remember what we said at the beginning. This path is not about just eliminating symptoms, but cultivating this state of health. So something I invite you all to do, and it's fundamental along the Buddhist path, is to develop and gradually have more and more clarity, this idealized image of what you would like to be. When we see the image of Buddha, for example, in this temple there's so many, what they represent are like the kind of the witnesses of what we want to reach. Here we have aspects, we have these five Buddhas of different colors, which represent our qualities that have been developed to their highest potential. And here we also have, like, the far right, we have a Buddha Amoghasiddhi with Aryatara, and it's here having the male and female together it takes us beyond just being a male and female. Um, so the green also represents this, going beyond envy and jealousy, and our ability to rejoice for others, and this power of realizations and certainty of every action. It represents the green. Amoghasiddhi represents this ability and certainty in every action. These are not gods that we're asking things for, but they're using a more modern term. They're archetypes. So Ratnasambhava, yellow here, represents and Lochana, it represents the development of generosity, of humility, this this no, this not needing to compare ourselves with anyone. So it, yeah, it's about going beyond our own miserliness, developing equanimity, being able to see in everything and every being what's similar and unite them. Finding also the balance and finding the balance of our own feelings and ability to grow. It's represented by Ratnasambhava. Akshobhya, in blue in color behind me, represents in just a few words the development of love, of compassion, inner stability, calm, spontaneous joy, and overcoming resentment and instability, sadness and anxiety and anger. It shows our ability to be at peace with ourselves. Red, our color, so Akshobhya and Mamaki. Maybe some might say, why is he blue and she white? Because man, the masculine and the feminine represent even different archetypes, maybe with the same qualities, but the feminine represents, in this case, the elements. The green is wind, and yellow is earth, and blue, which is at blue at our heart, and instead Mamaki is uh, is water. Water, even she represents also qualities of the mother. Someone might ask why Akshobhya is not white. I don't know. And here in red we have Amitabha and a red Panavarsini. These names, the names represent the qualities. Amitabha represents concentration, the ability to direct the mind and stay there. The satisfaction represents communication, harmonious and harmonious communication, correct discernment. So eliminating dissatisfaction, distraction, mental torpor, and foggy-mindedness, and discernment, perfect discernment. Then we have Veruchana, who's white, together with Akashvatra, who's the element white, the element of space. And she's white. He's white, she's blue. This is the correct view of reality, this inner infinite space. I mean, these are the qualities of Vairochana. So it's about overcoming ignorance, overcoming limited inner space, which if you see at the center above, in blue, above, you can't see very well, but there's Vajradhara in the center. He's blue in color with this mudra. Yes, he holds in his hand a Vajra and a bell. That represents the union of these 5 Dhyani Buddhas. The Vajra represents method, love, compassion, the love towards oneself and love towards others, and the bell represents wisdom and the correct view of reality, masculine, masculine and feminine energy, independently of being a man or a woman. I mean, we could spend hours talking about this. I just went past over it quickly. The point that I want to get to is that these are qualities that we need to develop, like a mirror of what we want to be. And it's fundamental for us to have an image of who I'd like to be. I want to be Akshobhya. I want to be Amitabha, Amoghasiddhi. I want to develop these qualities in myself. And this image we have here, we have Atisha Lama Tsongkhapa, Buddha Shakyamuni and Trijang Rinpoche, who are our witnesses. They are those who said, I bought there are testimonials. I bought the product and it works. You can try it too. It's expensive because it requires a lifetime dedication. Um, it requires a change in conduct and lifestyle, a change in paradigm, but it works. And it has the many other images represent this transmission of experience and knowledge and transmission. So for ourselves, before saying that it works for ourselves, we have to say that it works. And the point that I want today, so if we just wanted to look for a point to connect with today, we should ask ourselves, so what do I want? Not what do I want to obtain, but who do I want? Who do I want to be? Not who do I want to be in society. No, who do I want to be inside? How do I want to be? And try to have a very, very strong desire. I want to be a being with love and satisfaction, at peace. I want to be able to face every situation with harmony. I don't want to be taken by jealousy or, I just can't handle it anymore. I'm tired and I don't have time to waste, sooner or later, sooner than later, I'm going to die. Just be taken by all these mental defilements. I just can't do it anymore. I mean, who do I want to be? And someone may have heard that desire should be eliminated. No, it should be cultivated, but it needs to be directed. It's one of the most important strengths and energies that we have in our lives, but it depends on what I want. We need to have passion to be a Buddha. I want nirvana, not as a place, but as an inner state of being. And to get there, I need to invest energy constantly in the way I think and speak and act and I react. Just to conclude for today, a very practical piece of advice. Let's try gradually. It's not something immediate, but let's try to have a clear idea of an idealized image of who we want to be. Like a Buddha, for example, it represents this. And in front of this, we should see what aspects of my being, what aspects bring me closer to this image, and what aspects of myself take me far from that. In other words, what aspects should I cultivate and which ones should I abandon? And once we have clarity there, this is not immediate, this takes time, we'll see that there are aspects of ourselves that we want to abandon, but they come spontaneously. It's not because I know I shouldn't get angry that I'm able just to get angry. So at this point, what we should try to do is, above all, is to not nourish and cultivate these negative conditionings that we have. No one here is able, here or anywhere else, to just cut a kind of negative conditioning. We're all able instead to not nourish them anymore, or nourish less and less, so that then we're able to not nourish at all these feelings of anger and resentment and fear and anxiety, etc. And instead nourish the opposite. And someone might say it takes so much time. Well, we're here alive. We need as long as we're here alive, let's try to direct ourselves in the best way possible. So just in a few words, it's this: define what you want. What you want to be, and then to be that, what do you need to abandon, and what should you cultivate? And so we to not nourish something, then we should not we should not interact with those negative minds that arise. We don't manifest it verbally. We don't get into any kind of discussion with someone, or we don't act. We don't make decisions. So when a negative mind arises, we don't nourish it by not interacting with it. We don't block it, but we don't follow it. We don't interact physically, verbally, or mentally. We don't go into any kind of dialogue with that mental, that negative defilement that arises. And every time we're able to not follow a negative emotion, like anger, for example, it just weakens. And every time we're able to induce, even artificially, a sincere state of love or generosity, then we're nourishing that aspect of ourselves. So independently of the job you do, or the kind of life you lead, or independently of your family situation, work situation. I mean, the path is not. The path is cannot be found where you are. The path is found how you live your life, and if you're able to feed your negative not able to feed your negative conditionings, but instead nourish your positive qualities. And then, of course, there are all sorts of practices of meditations or mantras or studies that are tools to help nourish our qualities, and also help us to cut our negative our negative defilements. So you don't have to feel like you're Buddhist if that's not the point. I mean, if you want to feel like you are part of a group, that's okay. But we're talking about a path for a lifetime. I mean, there's so many other things, but this is the basis, what I think is fundamental. And remember that this foundation needs to be seen again and again and again, because maybe going along, in the years, as the years go by, maybe we become expert in certain techniques, but then maybe we've forgotten, or we're weak at the foundation. So we need to always go back. Now we're going to stop for lunch. After lunch, there's going to be a practice, a kind of ceremony. I call it what you want, the so-called refuge, and it's something before that I never put in the program formally, because it's very personal. It's like comes based on request, um, but it's always very difficult to also find the time to do it. So if you're interested in taking refuge for the first time, you're welcome. If you want to solidify your refuge, you're welcome. Or if you're just interested in watching, you can come and participate. Normally, it's said that one takes refuge in a master after 12 years of following him, where there's just total certainty, and one formalizes formalizes this desire to follow. So you can take it for the first time. You can renew your refuge, or if you would like to just understand more, you can come. I mean, and there's no obligation whatsoever to come here. I mean, one could follow for 30 years and without having formally taken refuge. One's just waiting in the so in So in the Buddhist tradition, we make prayers at the beginning, and at the end, we rejoice. And
Dralme cheki pela longche ching Sadan lamge yente rabzone Dorje change kopa nyurtoba Sho chanchubo semcho rimpoche Make panama ke gyurchin Kepa nyampara me payang Kongne kontu pelwar sho Nimo dele tsendele Nime kunyan delek Ninten taktu delek pef Concio sumke jingelo all'alba o al tramonto, di notte o durante il giorno, possano i tre gioielli concederci le loro benedizioni, possano aiutarci ad ottenere tutte le realizzazioni e cospargere Lam Tudro possa il Dharma diventare il sentiero,
may the Dharma become the path.
possa il sentiero essere libero da interferenze.
May the path be free of interferences.
Oma hun tambal tu chetim betrin leya pe gyedro lo zambe